Hey guys, welcome back. Austin here, David Noville. In today's video, I'll be reacting to Scary Stories Animated. Every YouTuber has done this. Sorry, I'm so quiet. It's really late. Wink, wink. I'm just joking, guys. I'm winking because I may or may haven't, because I was scared of cat, set the time differently and turn and put blinds up so it seemed dark out. Anyway guys, but yeah, it's 3 a.m. and we're going to be reacting to 20 horror stories animated. And what am I doing?
Side, perfecting my tan for the start of school next month. Mom was in the kitchen, cooking her famous fettuccine alfredo.
If I get to see, not that, if I get to see that every day, then I'm just joking, guys. This is supposed to be kid friendly. Anyway, let me turn the volume up. This is gonna be so scary.
Way home with a movie from Redbox.
Oh my god.
My life. Side, perfecting my tan for the start of school next month.
Oh.
Mom was in the kitchen, cooking her famous fettuccine alfredo, and Dad was on the way home with a movie from Redbox.
Yeah.
My life was perfect, but everything was about to change with the arrival of a new neighbor next door. He was a former police officer, probably mid-50s, possessed a firm drill sergeant-like tone, but was very friendly and talkative. Initially, he seemed like a good fit for the neighborhood. He was cordial, always made an effort to wave or say hi, and the presence of someone with a law enforcement background provided a sense of security. But everything began to unravel quickly, and the catalyst seemed to be me. My neighbor took a sudden and keen interest in me. Whenever I went outside, I could feel his eyes examining me. He would always wander over and try to start conversations with me, but as soon as he heard or saw my parents, he would leave. He asked me if I had any social media accounts. When I lied and said no, he asked if he could take a picture of me and proceeded to snap a pic before I could reply. I felt completely unnerved and frightened about his intentions for me.
Police. Nope.
For all I knew, that we could have a murderer or pedophile living a mere feet from our home. I knew I had to delve deeper, so one night I aimed my telescope at his window, and what I saw only amplified the alarm bells going off in my head. The man was fixated on the picture of me on his phone, and I could even see a small stack of photos on his nightstand, a young girl's image on top. My blood ran cold, as this all but confirmed my fear. He must be a pedophile. The next night, I saw him sneakily rummaging through our trash can. I watched in horror and disbelief as he removed my used tampon, got into his car, and sped off in the night.
Call the cops.
This was the final straw.
Call the cops.
I knew that in the morning, I would have to alert my parents and get in contact with the police. And next morning, I awoke to the sound of police sirens and a loud commotion downstairs. I hopped out of bed and saw my parents being taken away in handcuffs. I started screaming and crying as I rushed towards the door, but I was stopped by the neighbor. With a horrified expression, he muttered, "I'm so sorry. Those aren't your real parents. You were kidnapped and missing the past 14 years. DNA test confirmed it."
So he's not a pedophile. He was actually
It was on
a
Friday
detective.
night. I was finishing the last deliveries that I worked.
The pictures she might have gotten the pictures wrong and thought that there were different girls. So
I was headed to the bar that I would usually go to every night to grab a glass of wine. I noticed there was a new bar that had recently opened, a kilometer away from the usual bar.
Wow,
So
let's
I
go.
decided to try it out. When I arrived
I
and
just
pushed the
set up my
entrance
desk,
door,
so.
I noticed something very weird. There were only 5 people inside, and they were all dressed in Halloween costumes, like vampire, ghost, werewolf, witch, and black magician. I felt really uncomfortable because I was the only ordinary person there, and also because Halloween was over 2 days ago. I was still awkwardly standing there blocking the entrance when all of a sudden, all the people started staring at me as if I had done something terribly wrong.
Oh.
I made my move and walked over to the bartender. The bartender looked almost like a real executioner. He asked me rudely in a gruff voice, "What do you want to sacrifice, blood or flesh?" Well, that creeped the hell out of me, but I thought this was his way of taking a Halloween order of alcohol. So I requested to him, "1 glass of blood, please." He turned around, grabbed a wine bottle, and poured it into a wine glass. Later, he opened a drawer and took out a black satanic pentagram necklace. He dipped the necklace 3 times while muttering something into my drink. To my surprise, the wine turned black in color, and he placed the glass on the table and told me to drink it in 1 shot. I was really thirsty at that moment, so I took the glass and drank it completely.
Ew, that's the weirdest
It was quite strong, and my vision was slowly starting to blur. I paid the bartender and left the bar immediately.
It's sacrifice.
While I was walking, I started to feel dizzy, and my vision was worsening. I wasn't focused on where I was going, as my mind was in a vision of all the faces of all the people I saw in that bar, maniacally laughing and giggling at me. All of a sudden, I had already arrived home during my vision. At first, I was relieved. But when I closed the door behind me and turned around, I knew that I was in the wrong house. It was completely abandoned, cold, gloomy, and barely lit with the rays of moonlight. I tried to open the door, but it was totally locked.
It was totally
Right when I was going to run into the door to break it, I heard the upper wooden ceiling was creaking, as if someone was up there walking slowly, step by step. I was really afraid as I had no weapon to protect myself.
I'm
I
afraid
tried to
right
call
now.
911, but had no
I'm in my
reachable
room
service
by
to call.
myself in the dark.
My only option was to go upstairs and find my way out. I carefully walked upstairs and reached the top. To my left was a dead end, but to my right I saw a hallway with 3 doors on each side. I opened the doors one by one to find nothing but dark, empty rooms and no way to escape. Finally, when I opened the 6th door, I saw a pentagram was drawn on the floor with 5 candles around, touching all 5 corners of the
There was
star.
5 people and he had a
This sent me
pentagram.
back to where the bartender dipped a necklace with the same symbol into my drink. And there was a figure floating vertically right above the symbol below. But the light provided by the candles was not enough for me to figure out what was floating.
A ghost.
Accidentally, I dropped my phone on the old wooden floor, which created a loud sound. The figure was slowly advancing to my direction. I quickly backed off and hit my head against the wall behind. That figure, I can't forget it. My body was completely paralyzed when I saw that the same bartender at the bar was this guy. He was still dressed as an executioner and faced my powerless body. To make matters worse, the doors of the empty room started opening on their own,
No.
one by one,
No.
and out came all of the 5 people I saw at the bar. They were all laughing at me to the point I passed out.
Fake.
Then I heard silence.
Or
Then I
just
woke up and
hallucinating.
realized that I was in a hospital. I asked one of the nurses what was going on. She told me that a group of teenagers saw me walking out of the forest and then walking to the abandoned house. They tried calling out to me, but I didn't respond, nor look at them. Then the group saw me entering the house, and when they tried to open the door, it was locked. And so they called 911 thinking that I was trapped in that house.
Is it locked from the inside?
30 minutes later, the police staff arrived and broke open the door and found me unconscious lying on the floor. They brought me into the hospital and were trying to investigate what had happened in that abandoned house. Later, I told police officers the whole story when they came to ask. but they didn't seem to believe me, while some of them were laughing, thinking that I was making it up. After that, I went home and directly went to sleep. The next morning, I hurried to the bathroom because I had to vomit very badly. And after I did, I noticed that my vomit was black. To forget things, I tried taking a cold shower.
Don't.
And
show
when I was
anything.
showering, I felt a sharp sting on my back. Then, when I changed the water temperature from cold to warm, the sting started to feel even more painful. I turned back with my head, barely making it to see behind. Then I was shocked for life. I had the same satanic pentagram carved on my back, which was surely done by a sharp object. From then on, I never went to a bar again.
No, 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 not.
Heart rate's 120, BP's 140/90. Hectic first day, but earning my nursing degree online.
My name is Kate. I'm 22 years old, and about 3 years ago, I got a job working at Sam's.
She's not a girl. Girls don't sound like that unless she has like a voice changer. Or just change her
Club.
voice.
My best friend Mimi, who worked there
My best friend Mimi.
before me, was the one who suggested that I apply there. Her job was to work on the cash register
It's
Mine
bigger,
was to
she's
stock
a
shelves.
changer.
and keep certain areas tidy.
And what type of person
One day,
looks like
a young man entered the store and started to make conversation with me. I would say he was around 25 years old. After some friendly chit-chat, he eventually said that I looked like a model,
Oh,
and he has contacts within the modeling agencies. Honestly, I didn't believe a word he said. He was nice, but I wasn't about to fall for this. After many attempts of trying to persuade me to go with him to meet somewhere, to meet some contacts, he eventually gave up.
my God.
He didn't
Yeah,
leave the
exactly.
store, however,
Don't even.
because about 5 minutes later I noticed him talking to Mimi as she was working on the cash register. I was hoping she wouldn't fall for it, but unfortunately she did.
Oh,
At the end of our
my
shift,
God.
we spoke about what the guy had said, and Mimi really believed that the guy could get her modeling gigs. I told her not to meet him, and she said she wouldn't. About a week later,
She did it. She did.
she didn't turn up to work and wasn't answering calls or texts. In fact, she kind of went missing. It was about a week until I finally heard from her. She was in a hospital. Mimi had met up with the guy from the store. She wouldn't say what happened in detail, but what she did tell me was disturbing enough. She met up with the guy from the store in a very old, rundown apartment. There were two very large men, one skinny old guy.
What?
She was attacked. Two men drugged her, and she fell unconscious.
That's not
And when she woke up, she was in extreme pain. The men she met up with knocked her out and took all of her belongings.
What?
Police said that she was lucky. I'm sorry that Mimi had to go through all of that, but thankfully she wasn't killed. But I'm glad it wasn't me that got lured into the man's sick plan.
Yeah, I would be glad to. A creepy tree man story. Wait, trees aren't real.
I was 15. I was at my boyfriend's house and
Again, not sure. That girl sounds like a boy unless he has a changer. But man, she is hot.
it was about 10:30 p.m.
But it doesn't matter what girls look out the outside. It's about what's in the inside. About how they are in the inside.
We
They're nice, kind.
were sitting on his trampoline in his backyard, which faces a small park behind his house.
Okay.
His yard is on a ground level, about a meter above the ground level the park is on, and his fence is on that lower level. So by sitting on the trampoline, we could see out into the darkness of the park, which was just slightly illuminated by his yard lights.
That's just no.
We're talking when suddenly I feel an eerie chill, like we're being watched, like something wants us to know we're being watched. I remember glancing all over the place and jumping at the smallest sounds of the night. My boyfriend was laughing at me, and all before he suddenly stilled and rose up onto his knees to look at something in the park.
Hey, there's a man watching us from that tree over there.
Those words still chill me to the core. I froze and asked him to tell me what he was doing.
She's hopping up the
He
table.
told me that the man was very tall, almost halfway up the tree, which was a large eucalyptus.
No. 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 I can't deal with that. No. No.
And that only his head and shoulder were really visible, and that his eyes were glowing or reflecting the light from his yard lights. I wondered if he was lying and making fun of me again for being paranoid earlier, so I sat up and leaned over him to see the thing next to the tree. There it was. It was tall and darker than the shadows of the trees, and wasn't lit up like the trees were from the lights. Its eyes were shining brightly, and it was exceptionally tall. It couldn't be a man, if not for the shoulder and arm draped over the tree, and so it wasn't an animal either. I fell back onto the trampoline, and my boyfriend told me to be quiet and to start moving back towards the house. It was moving towards us. I shook my head. I didn't want to move. I couldn't even bring myself to move. I was frozen in fear or something.
Don't move, you die.
I don't know, but I remember he had to force me up, swearing loudly and telling me it was nearly at the fence. I got up and caught a glance of a figure nearly across the short distance from the trees to his yard, and I booked it to the stairs up to his front door. I glanced back to look again, and my boyfriend yelled at me not to, and that he was climbing over the fence. And I somehow moved even faster and made it to the door without tripping up the stairs and breaking a leg. He told me again it had been trying to climb over the fence when I slowed down to take a look. His family is very religious, and his father swears it was a demon trying to test their faith or something, but I don't think it was. I had another encounter maybe a month later. My boyfriend told me that a figure was watching me from exposed ceiling beams of my old barn-like house during a FaceTime call late at night. Maybe a shadow man. Maybe an Australian version of a skinwalker.
Skinwalker.
I'm not really sure, and I'm 19 now, and I still can't stop thinking about what happened.
No. I don't even think I'm
My
ready to
name
get
is
past- I
Lanai,
don't think
and
we
I'm
can
an
get
18-year-old
all
from New
this.
Jersey that is currently living in Ohio.
Yeah, this is
And
more
this
of a
experience
smart
happened to me a few months ago at my brother's house. My brother Ivan had just
Oh,
moved
sis,
into this house with his wife
that's
and his
great.
10-year-old child. It was my first ever time visiting,
'Kay, you
since I
guys
was
can hear
working
me.
all the time and we was barely home. Anyway, I arrived at my brother's house and got out of my car. As soon as I pulled into the driveway of the place, I started getting an uneasy feeling. The house was a blue 3-story house that was surrounded by 2 other houses, and while I grabbed my purse, I glanced up at the window. I froze. Because staring back at me from the second-floor window was this older man wearing a flannel. His hair was long and was messy, but he was gone within seconds. I brushed this
glad you-
off, figuring maybe Ivan and our other brother Ian was screwing with me. But both Ivan and Ian came out to first floor and gave me a hug. I was a bit freaked out over this, but I sucked it up and walked inside with them. Upstairs on the second floor was where my niece Iris and my nephew sleep, and my brother and his wife slept on the 3rd floor. Of course, Iris was excited to see me and wanted me to see her room. So she took me by my hand and ran me upstairs to her room. All I can
You
say,
guys better be
this place was
subscribed to my
creepy,
channel, 'cause if you
and it
aren't,
smelled like a
then I
rotting
do all
corpse
this
of
stuff.
something. The room was cold, and it felt as if time stopped altogether.
Oh,
I
that
slept cold. It smelled like a rotting corpse of something. The room was cold, and it felt as if time stopped altogether. I suddenly snapped out of this trance I was in, and Iris was showing me her collection of items she got from our grandmother in Korea when we all went together.
Korea?
Iris was paying no attention to me at all, but she kept talking and then said, "Hey, Auntie, I'll be right back. Stay here, okay?" I agreed, and she left the room. I went over to one of the walls nearest to the window to where I saw the man earlier. On the wall, I noticed something was there.
Like, she's walking like
I
a
took a
hippie.
few steps closer, and I saw the
Okay, I have
name
to be quiet 'cause
Max
my
carved
parents
into the
are asleep.
wall. It, strangely enough, was also in what looked like blood or something. I got chills down my spine, and just as this was happening, I heard what sounded like a man say, "You'll never leave, Lanai." And then I was spun around by nothing. There was nobody there. I was alone, and something had what felt like a hand around my neck, choking me. The smell got even worse. It got colder, and suddenly I could no longer breathe. After about another 5 seconds of being choked, I was thrown up against the wall and slammed to the floor. I was crying, and I jumped up, really not giving a shit about what attacked me. But I practically mowed Iris over as I sprinted down the stairs, ran past my very confused brothers. I was shouting as I dashed for my keys and pretty much dived myself into my car. I started it up and looked one more time at the window, and a pair of yellow eyes with the most fucked up Joker-looking smile stared at me. I threw my '67 Chevy into reverse and never looked back. Now, after a few months, I live by myself in a house in Dayton. I think he followed me, because now I see, hear, and sense things. Stuff in my house gets thrown at me and breaks. I can still smell that rotting corpse smell to this every day.
Good to see you.
Yeah, hey, what's with the polka dots?
What do you mean?
Honey,
Polka dots are out. It's polka squares.
make sure to go download the new date. I'm not gonna get into it. Time's curse makes you too danger.
I remember it as clear as it was yesterday. It
Wait,
happened
is this
when
the-
I was in high school, where kindergarten campus, elementary, high school, and college campuses are all located near to each other.
I've
It is a
heard this
huge
voice
school.
before.
So getting lost sometimes is inevitable. At that time, I was with my teammates, Rouge, Aaron, and Cecile. I was part of the math club in our campus, and the math room was relocated at the elementary
joking, guys.
campus,
Art comes in
since
different
the
forms
one
and
we usually
shapes, and it's
trained in
good.
was under construction. It was weirdly quiet when we were walking at a long catwalk passing
Say, why
through a
the
big oak
next
tree.
this thick?
The tree was old, and I remembered
Really
passing
this thick.
by it always when I was in kindergarten. A shiver ran against my
Look
skin as
what
we
is
passed
that?
it, and I remember feeling a bit dizzy, but shrugged it
Is
off.
it bigger than
As
mine?
we were nearing our room,
No.
we saw a commotion at a distance. Third graders, I believe, were outside of their room, and the teacher was trying her best to calm them while leading them to the fourth graders' room. The four of us looked at each other, curious about what is happening. So, we agreed to figure out what was happening. As we neared the distance, hairs at the back of my neck started to rise, and my eyes widened at what I heard next. Coming from the third grader's room, a loud animalistic roar and loud thumps were heard. We were
No.
petrified as we closed in. Cecile told Aaron to look at the windows, as it was apparent that all of us were already frozen on our places. Aaron stepped forward, and I saw right then the horror registered in his face. But
Why
curiosity got the best of us as to what
Why
happened.
did our eyes
With
go
the
to-
ear-deafening screams inside, I wanted to know
no,
what
no,
was
no,
happening.
no,
The
okay.
next thing I remember then, that made me drop my bag, was the sight of a girl tied on a chair in a dim room, shouting. The teachers were holding her in place and praying while one of them is demanding that the demon inside of her to leave.
No.
My teeth chattered uncontrollably as the skeptic in me vanished.
There's no way.
The sight was terrifying. that it made me think of horror movies that usually made me stay up at night. It was scary to see it in real life. We backed away when the possessed girl mentioned our names one by one and continued laughing. As her hair moved and we came face to face with it, her eyes were all white. She was pale. Saliva was dripping out of her outstretched mouth. One of the teachers hurriedly walked out of the room and yelled at us to go away, and as swiftly, we scrambled away from the scene.
I can't wait.
Several days later, the news got out, and everyone in the campus knew what happened. They said that the girl played earlier at that huge oak tree and angered the ghosts living there.
No.
We still could not believe what happened, but one thing is for sure. The memory stayed with me forever, reminding me that sometimes curiosity can lead you to danger.
That's why you say curiosity kills the cat. Killed the cat and what? Okay,
I live in the same house since my birth till I'm 18. It used to be my grandfather's house.
Don't they
and
sound the
he gave
same?
it to
Comment
his
down below if they
sons.
sound the same, because I know they do.
We all live together, my father and his 2 brothers with their wives and children. Our grandpa passed away when I was about to born. When me and my cousins were young, our parents scared us by telling that before grandpa bought this house, there were husband and wife been murdered and their bodies were found in our water tanks and they became ghosts now. They told us this story to keep us away from the roof and water tanks as they all go to work.
I don't think ghosts are real.
At my young age,
Comment
I
down below if
didn't
you do
notice
think
these
ghosts are real.
paranormal stuff happening. But after I reached 11, my life changed. We all had separate room, but me and my 2 sisters shared one room.
Oh, lucky.
I was just watching some videos on YouTube until late at night. It was around 2:00 a.m. and my sisters were asleep on their bed. My bed was the middle and the room was pretty dark. I could see only my mobile phone when someone just tapped my knee 3 times. I was jumped with fear. I quickly
Hold on.
used my phone.
How in the world could they tap you 3 times before you jump scare? Like, wouldn't it be like this? I guess that was nothing. Okay, something touched me there. Oh my! Like, or wouldn't it be logical to be like this? Like,
phone
this
light to
doesn't
see
seem
who it was,
scary.
but no one was
Doesn't
there.
seem
I thought it was
scary.
only my imagination, and then I covered myself with a blanket and tried to sleep. And suddenly, I saw a white shadow of both man and woman with long hairs, and a young girl. I screamed as loud as I could. Everybody woke up, but they never believed me. That night, I shared my bed with my cousin, and I started noticing that kind of stuff later on day.
Oh.
After that day, 2 police officers came in our house and meet my father. Me, my sister, and my cousins were watching from the stairs, and the police officers told him that they were looking for the murderers of Mr. and Mrs. They said they could not found for years, so they are going to close this case. We also found out that the Mrs. was pregnant at the same time she was murdered. We were all scared. Another big incident happened last month. My mother was working in the kitchen and I was also sitting there gossiping with her. I mentioned the case of Mr. and Mrs. and suddenly the glass table beside me was broken.
Why would the table automatically just break? Like,
I was lucky that I stood up at the right moment. But there was no explanation of how it broke. In my house, there are 18 people living.
hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yep, she's right.
And everybody has a haunting experience every time we mention their case. We are still living in that house as nothing serious harm has happened to anybody. but I'm still afraid.
Why the frick do you live there? Okay, guys. This is gonna be the last one, and we're gonna end it because I'm starting to get the chills. Hey guys, I finally got Hello Neighbor to work because I found out what was so bad about it, why it was glitching. So if we hit 5 likes on today's video, I will, you know what, if we hit 2 likes on today's video, I will do a Hello Neighbor game. Okay, so then if you hit 2 likes, then that tells me that you guys want to see a Hello Neighbor game. We'll meet recording myself playing a Hello Neighbor game, which is gonna be awesome because I'm gonna use a controller, have the camera on top, and it's not gonna be lagging, and it's gonna be pre-alpha. So
When I was 11 years old, I spent the night hanging out with my closest.
this is the same girl. Okay, this is the same girl, and again, not a girl's voice unless you have a
Friend
change.
at the time.
And plus,
I left around 7 o'clock.
That's the same.
He was
Oh, wait,
about 15 to 20 minute.
No. Then in this case, she. Hold up. I just got the chills. Okay. This is a different girl, but anyway, that's not a girl's sound unless you have a changer. And plus, that voice was from that girl.
Walk
From the
away
last
from my
video.
house. It was the month of December, so it was icy and dark outside. While I was walking down the long sidewalk, I had to make a turn halfway.
Yeah, this
Across the turn down the sidewalk, I noticed a man way further
They
down.
both have the
He
same
was
voice.
alone at the moment.
And that looks like
10
Green Sky.
seconds later, a 4-door car drove up to him. It was a long street till my turn, so I watched him talk to whoever it was in the car. It sped off, and he just stopped, watching me as I walked. As I kept walking, all I heard was, "Hey you, come here, stop, hey you." So I freaked out. I started walking faster and then noticed he started running toward me. I started running for my life. Since the ground was covered in snow and ice, all I literally thought was, "Please, God, don't let me slip." I was crying, and I was running. He caught up extremely fast. I kept looking back and noticed the car slowly driving behind him. As I ran, I felt his arm reach out and try to grab the hood of my sweatshirt. By God's grace, his hand slipped, and I ran a block trying to find a house with the lights on. I finally found one and banged at the door, almost ready to break it down. This older couple finally answered, and I ran inside explaining what happened. The husband then went outside to try to find him. When he went out, he saw the man standing at the end of the street staring at him. Then he ran off. My mom called the police and pulled me out of school for 4 days afterward. And this guy was never found. For a while after, I would buy flowers and a card and leave it on the couple's step, thanking them for saving my life. God only knows what would have happened if he got me and dragged me to the car.
Team Fight Tactics. Play it now for free. You know League of Legends, right? Well, it's nothing like that.
Okay. Hope you guys did enjoy. Make sure to hit the like button. If we hit 2 likes, guys, I'll do a Hello Neighbor game with it not being laggy. So, yeah, guys, trust me, you want to see that video. It's gonna be cool. Okay, guys, see you guys next time. Goodbye. Which is gonna end in a couple of minutes.